3 days before Christmas, my own son called to tell me I wasn't welcome at his table. "Just stay home, Mom," he said. "You wouldn't fit in." He thought I was a poor old widow in a tiny apartment. He had no idea that the week before I'd quietly bought an $18 million beachfront mansion paid in cash. They wanted a small Christmas with only the people who mattered. So I decided to show them exactly who matters and what they were about to lose. The phone rang on a Tuesday evening in mid-December, 3 days before I would change my entire life. I was sitting in my small apartment on Carolina Street in Charleston, a cup of chamomile tea cooling on the side table when I saw my son's name light up the screen. James. I smiled the way mothers do, the way I'd been smiling at that name for 38 years. I had no idea those next 90 seconds would cut me deeper than anything had in a decade. "Hey, baby, how's my favorite lawyer?" "Mom." His voice was careful, rehearsed. The voice of a man reading from a script someone else had written. "Listen about Christmas this year. We're going to keep it small, just Victoria's family." I waited for the rest. The part where he'd laugh and say, "Just kidding, Mom, of course you're coming." It didn't come. "Just Victoria's family," I repeated, slow tasting the words. "What does that mean, James?" He exhaled. I could picture him pinching the bridge of his nose the way his father used to. "Victoria wants to do something special this year. Something more formal. Her parents are flying in from Connecticut, and you know how they are. There's a whole etiquette to it. Fine china, a seated dinner, the whole thing. We thought, I said, or Victoria thought. A pause. The kind of pause that tells a mother everything. "Mom, please don't make this hard. It's one Christmas. You can stay home, relax, watch your shows. No pressure. No fancy dinner you have to dress up for. No pressure." As if I were a child who couldn't handle a fork. As if 62 years of living, of raising him alone after his father passed, of working double shifts and skipping meals so he could have new shoes for school, as if all of that had earned me a TV tray and a rerun on Christmas Day. In the background I heard her, Victoria, that smooth, polished voice that always sounded like it was reading a wine list. "Is she being difficult? James tell her we'll send a gift basket." A gift basket. For the woman who carried him for 9 months and 42 hours of labor. And then quieter almost to herself, but loud enough that she knew I'd hear it. "Where is she even from Charleston? My mother won't know what to talk to her about." Where is she from? Like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Like I hadn't held her hand at her own wedding when her mother was too busy criticizing the floral arrangements. Like I didn't know exactly where I was from and exactly who I was. "Mom," James said, "you still there?" I looked across my small living room, at the second-hand sofa I'd reupholstered myself, at the framed photo of James at 8 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding the fishing rod I'd saved 3 months to buy him, at the woman I'd let everyone believe I was for 12 long years. And something inside me, something that had been bending and bending for over a decade, finally went still. Not broken, still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm decides which direction to move. "That's fine, sweetheart," I said, and my voice came out so calm, so gentle that it surprised even me. "You enjoy your Christmas." The line went quiet. He'd expected tears, maybe pleading, maybe the guilt trip he could dismiss as his mother being dramatic. He hadn't expected grace. "Really?" he said, and I heard the suspicion in it, the faint disappointment of a man denied the fight he'd prepared for. "You're not upset?" "No, baby. I want you to have a beautiful holiday. Give Tyler a kiss for me." I hung up before he could say another word. For a long moment I sat in the silence of my apartment, the tea gone cold, the city lights blinking through my window. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I let myself remember. All of it. I remembered the first time I met Victoria 12 years ago. James had brought her home, this beautiful girl with a Connecticut accent and a habit of looking at people like she was pricing them. She'd swept her eyes over my home, the home where I'd raised her future husband, and I'd watched her file it away as modest. as less than. She'd smiled and called me Ms. Diane with the exact tone you'd use for the help. I remembered Tyler's first birthday, how I'd shown up with a hand-knit blanket I'd worked on for 6 weeks, and Victoria had set it aside without a glance, already turning to the imported gift wrap from her cousin. "Oh, how homemade," she'd said. The word landed like a slap. I remembered 5 years ago when James lost a big case and money got tight, and I quietly covered 2 months of their mortgage. I never told a soul, and Victoria, who didn't know where the money came from, had said over dinner, "Honestly, some people just don't understand how expensive quality is," and looked right at my plate. I remembered last Christmas when Sweet Tyler, who still ran to me with his arms wide open, had asked, "Grandma, why aren't you rich like Mommy?" And before I could answer, Victoria had laughed and said, "Because not everyone has the right skills, sweetheart. Some people just get by. Get by." I'd smiled and said nothing. I'd been smiling and saying nothing for 12 years. But here's what Victoria didn't know. What James didn't know. What no one in that family had ever once thought to ask. I had not been getting by. Not for a single day of those 12 years. I rose from the sofa, walked to my bedroom, and stood before the framed print on the wall, a cheap reproduction of a Romar Bearden collage I'd hung there precisely because no one would ever think to look behind it. I lifted it from its hook. Behind it, set into the wall, was a small steel safe. My fingers found the combination without thinking. The same 6 digits I'd entered 1,000 times in the quiet of midnight when the world was asleep, and I could be for just a few minutes exactly who I was. The door swung open, and there it was. Everything they'd never seen. Investment certificates stacked in neat folders. Property deeds, 3 of them, for homes in 3 different states. Brokerage statements with numbers on them that would have stopped Victoria's heart. A leather portfolio embossed with the name of a private wealth firm. And on top of it all, a single brass keyring, heavy and cold in my palm, attached to the deed I'd signed just 72 hours earlier. A deed for an $18 million beachfront estate in Palm Beach, Florida. I held that keyring up to the lamplight and watched it gleam. For 12 years, the world had decided who I was. The poor widow, the modest grandmother, the woman you sat at the end of the table if you bothered to set her a place at all. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the safe open before me like a door I'd finally decided to walk through, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very, very long time. I felt awake. They wanted a small Christmas, just family, just the people who mattered. "All right then," I said softly to no one and to everyone. "Let's find out who really matters." And for the first time in 12 years, the smile that crossed my face was entirely, completely my own. Sleep didn't come that night. I didn't want it to. Instead, I sat cross-legged on my bed at 62 years old, like a girl half my age. The contents of the safe spread across the quilt my own mother had stitched by hand, and I let myself walk back through the whole story. The real one. The one I'd kept folded up inside me like a letter I was afraid to send. It began with Robert, my husband, the love of my life, gone now 12 years, taken by a heart attack on an ordinary Thursday morning while he was tying his shoes. One minute he was humming Sam Cooke in the bathroom, and the next the world was a different shape entirely. I was 50 when I lost him, and for a while I lost myself too. But Robert, God rest him, had left me more than grief. What no one understood about my husband, what even I hadn't fully understood until the lawyers laid it all out, was that Robert Taylor was a quiet genius with money. He drove a 15-year-old Buick. He wore the same brown coat for 2 decades. He brought his lunch to work in a paper bag every single day for 30 years. And the whole time, while everyone saw a modest man in a modest life, he was building something. He'd started in the late 90s, putting small amounts into technology companies nobody had heard of. Companies with strange names that his coworkers laughed at him for buying. "Robert's playing his computer games again," they'd say. He'd just smile and keep buying. A little here, a little there. Names that would one day be worth more than entire countries. And then there was the land. Robert had an instinct for it, an almost supernatural sense for where a city was going to grow before the city itself knew. He bought parcels in places everyone called worthless scrubland outside Austin, a dusty stretch near Atlanta, a marshy lot 2 hours from Miami. People shook their heads. Robert just kept paying the property taxes and waiting. When he died, he left me a letter along with the will. I still have it. I keep it in the safe right on top because it's the most valuable thing I own, and not a dime of it is money. Diane it read in his careful block print. If you're reading this, I've gone on ahead. I'm sorry, baby. I always meant to tell you about all of it, but I kept thinking we had more time. We always think we have more time. The folder in the safe deposit box explains everything. You're going to be surprised. You're going to be just fine. Better than fine. Take care of our boy, but take care of yourself first. You spent your whole life putting everybody before you. Not anymore. Love every day like I loved you. Robert. The folder in the safe deposit box had explained everything all right. When the dust settled and the accounts were tallied, my husband, my paper bag lunch 15-year-old Buick husband, had left me an estate worth a little over $5 million. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, a 50-year-old widow in my best church dress, staring at that number and not understanding it. $5 million. It didn't feel real. It felt like a typo. So I did what Robert told me to do. I found people I could trust. A young financial advisor named Stephen Porter Sharp and Honest, who looked at Robert's portfolio and actually whistled. Ms. Taylor, he said, your husband didn't just invest. Your husband saw the future. If we manage this right, this doesn't shrink. This grows. And grow it did. Over 12 years with Stephen's guidance and Robert's foundation, that $5 million became something I still sometimes had trouble saying out loud, even alone in my bedroom at 3 in the morning. $92 million. I owned 3 homes outright. I owned 15 rental properties across 4 states that put $300,000 into my accounts every single month while I slept. I owned a stock portfolio that had outlived the recession, the pandemic, every panic the news could conjure. I had quietly and without a single soul knowing become a wealthy woman. Not comfortable, not well off. Wealthy. And I'd told no one. That was the part that even I sometimes struggled to explain. Why? Why keep it secret? Why live in a small apartment? Clip coupons, wear the same 3 good dresses to church. Let my own son slip me grocery money with that gentle, pitying look on his face. The honest answer had taken me years to admit. At first, it was grief. After Robert died, money felt obscene. Touching it, spending it, enjoying it felt like a betrayal of the man who'd saved every penny so carefully. So I left it alone. I let Stephen manage it, and I went on living the life Robert and I had built together because that life still felt like him. But then something shifted. As the months became years, I started to notice things. The way certain people looked at me when they thought I had nothing. The way the dinner invitations got fewer. The way Victoria's smile got thinner and James's defenses got weaker. The way I was slowly, quietly being moved to the edges of my own family. Not pushed exactly, but eased out like a piece of old furniture. Nobody wants to be the one to throw away. And a question took root in me, deep and patient, the way Robert's seeds had taken root in worthless land. Who loves me? Not who loves my money. Not who loves what I can give them. Who loves me, Diane, when they believe I have nothing left to offer but myself. So I kept the secret. Not out of deception, out of a need to know the truth. Because money has a way of buying you a family full of strangers who smile, and poverty has a way of showing you exactly who those strangers are. I wanted to see clearly, and for 12 years I had. I'd seen Emma, my sister, down in Atlanta drive 6 hours to sit with me when I had pneumonia, never once asking for anything. I'd seen my brother DeAndre, a mechanic with grease under his fingernails, and a heart the size of Georgia, slip me a $50 he couldn't really spare because he thought I was struggling. I'd seen my friend Rebecca call me every Sunday for a decade just to talk, just because she loved me. And I'd seen James, my beautiful, brilliant boy who I would lay down my life for in a heartbeat. I'd watched him let his wife shrink me year after year and say nothing. I'd watched him hand me $20 at the grocery store and feel good about himself. I'd watched him decide this very week that his own mother wasn't refined enough to sit at his Christmas table. The results, as I'd told myself 100 times, said everything. I looked down at the deed in my hands. The Palm Beach estate. I'd been watching that property for 8 months, the way Robert used to watch his strange little stocks. 12 bedrooms, a private beach, an infinity pool that ran right up to the edge of the Atlantic, so the water seemed to spill into the ocean and never end. I'd walked through it 3 weeks ago with a realtor who had no idea who I was, and I'd stood on the veranda and felt the salt wind on my face and thought Robert would have loved this. 3 days ago I'd signed the papers, paid in full, cash, and now my son had handed me a reason to use it. I gathered the documents back into the safe with the unhurried care of a woman who had all the time in the world. The certificates, the deeds, the statements. Robert's letter last of all kissed once and set on top. Then I closed the safe, hung the Bearden print back over it, and walked to my kitchen to make a fresh pot of coffee, because I was not going to sleep, and I had no intention of trying. By the time the sun came up over Charleston, I had a plan. It would not be revenge. I want to be clear about that, because revenge is small, and what I had in mind was not small. Revenge is about making someone hurt. What I wanted was something else entirely. I wanted to be seen. I wanted for one shining night to stop pretending to be smaller than I was. I wanted to gather every single person who had loved me when they thought I had nothing, and I wanted to give them a Christmas they would never forget. And if in the seeing of me certain other people came to understand exactly what they had thrown away, well, that would just be the truth finally standing up in the light. I poured my coffee, sat down at my little kitchen table, and picked up the phone. It was time to make some calls. The first call I made at 7 in the morning was to my sister. Emma picked up on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep and instant worry because a call before 8 from family is never good news. "Diane, what's wrong? Is it your heart?" "Nothing's wrong, baby. My heart's just fine." I poured myself a second cup of coffee and settled into my kitchen chair. "I'm calling to invite you to Christmas." There was a pause. Then a sigh I knew well, the sigh of a woman who'd been burned before. "Diane, I love you. But I am not coming if Victoria's going to be there looking at me like I tracked something in on my shoe. I came home for that woman 2 years ago, and I haven't stopped feeling small since." "Victoria won't be there," I said. "Come again? I'm hosting this year. My place. And there's not a single person on the guest list who's ever made you feel small a day in your life. Your place, Diane baby, your apartment can barely fit the two of us and a card table." She laughed gentle the way you laugh at someone you love. "What are you planning a potluck in the hallway?" I gave her the address. I read it out slow and clear, each word of it, and then I waited. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Emma, you still there?" "Diane?" Her voice had changed entirely. "That's Palm Beach. That's oceanfront Palm Beach. I watch those real estate shows. I know what's down there. Whose house is this?" "Mine," I said. "Yours." "Mine. Bought and paid for. I'll explain everything when you get here, but right now I need you to do 3 things. Pack your nicest outfit, the green one you wore to Robert's memorial. You looked like royalty in that. Get yourself on a plane. And don't tell a soul. Can you do that for me?" "Diane Elizabeth Taylor." My sister breathed, and I heard her starting to cry. "I don't understand a single thing that's happening right now, but I have been waiting 12 years to hear you sound like this. I'll be there. Lord help me, I'll be there." The next call was to my brother. DeAndre answered with a wrench, probably still in his hand. I could hear the clatter of the shop behind him. "Hey now, big sister, what's the occasion?" "I want you to bring the whole family to my place for Christmas. Yolanda, the kids, your mother-in-law, all of them. James called me yesterday, DeAndre said, and his voice went flat. Said the family Christmas was canceled this year. Some mix-up about Victoria's people coming. So my son had used my own brother to clear the way for the dinner I wasn't invited to. He'd called DeAndre a man who had never been anything but kind. A man Victoria had once at a barbecue suggested wash his hands before he touched the good glasses and told him not to come. I felt the old anger flicker, but I let it pass through me like weather. "There's no mix-up, Andy," I said. "There's just been a change of plans. And the change is that I'm hosting now, and you and yours are the guests of honor." "Diane?" He'd stopped working, I could tell. "Where exactly is your place?" I gave him the address. He was quiet a moment, then, "I'ma need you to say that again because I think I just heard you give me an address where movie stars live." "You heard me right. Wear that good suit. Bring your appetite. And Andy," I softened, "bring those babies. I want them running around like they own the place. Because one day they just might." I made call after call after call. I called my Aunt Ruthie in Savannah, who taught me to make sweet potato pie. I called Theodore's widow Loretta, who'd been quietly grieving and forgotten by half the family. I called the neighbors who used to be like blood before Victoria's idea of refinement slowly thinned out our gatherings. I called every single person Victoria and James had over the years decided weren't polished enough for the new version of our family. One by one they said yes. The guest list climbed past 30, then to 40, and it still wasn't done. Then I called Rebecca, my best friend of 20 years, the one person outside of Stephen who'd always known a piece of the truth. Rebecca ran a multi-million-dollar charitable foundation. She moved in rooms full of people with private jets and didn't blink. She was the only one in my life who'd ever seen me walk into a room of the wealthy and belong there. "Diane," she said warmly, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I'm finally doing it, Becca." She didn't have to ask what it was. She'd been telling me to do it for years. "The Palm Beach house, signed 3 days ago, and I'm throwing a Christmas. I want you there. I want my family to meet the Diane you know." Rebecca went quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was full. "Oh, sweetheart, they have no idea who's been sitting at the end of their table all these years, do they?" "Not yet," I said, "but they're about to." I called Stephen, my advisor, and asked him to come and to be ready to talk numbers if the moment called for it. I called a woman named Diana Mitchell, an interior designer Rebecca had recommended, and asked her to turn the estate into something out of a dream in 72 hours, money no object. I hired a private chef, Louis Beaumont, trained in France but raised in New Orleans, a man who could make collard greens sing next to a beef Wellington. And I asked Diana to bring a photographer. A good one. "What's the occasion exactly?" Diana asked. I thought about how to answer that. "The occasion," I said, "is that I've spent 12 years letting people believe I was less than I am, and I'm done." That evening, as the guest list sat at 41 confirmed and my phone was finally quiet, an email came in that I had not expected. The name in the sender line stopped me cold. Jackson Park. I knew that name. I'd only met the man twice years ago, but I remembered him clearly, a kind, soft-spoken architect who had once upon a time been engaged to Victoria. Before James. It had ended badly. Victoria never spoke of it, and the one time I'd asked James had only said, "She says he wasn't ambitious enough for her." Jackson had drifted out of our orbit entirely. I opened the email. "Ms. Taylor," it read. "You won't remember me well, but I never forgot your kindness. You were the only person in that whole family who ever treated me like I was worth something. I heard through a mutual friend that you're hosting a gathering this Christmas. I know this is unusual, and please feel free to ignore it. But I would be honored to attend if you'd have me. I've thought about your family often over the years, and there are some things I think you deserve to know about how that household really works. Things Victoria made sure no one ever found out. Whenever you're ready to hear them. Jackson." I read it twice, then a third time. Things you deserve to know. Things Victoria made sure no one ever found out. I sat with that for a long while, the Charleston dark settling over my little apartment, my coffee, long cold. For 12 years I had believed I understood the shape of Victoria's cruelty completely. I had catalogued every slight, memorized every wound. But here was a man telling me there was more. A whole chapter of the story I'd never read. I picked up my phone and typed back 2 words. Come, we'll talk. Then I set the phone down, looked out at the lights of the city I'd called home my whole life, and understood that the story I thought I was telling, a story about a woman reclaiming her dignity, had just grown another room. I did not yet know what was in it, but I was finally, after all these years, ready to open the door. I flew to Palm Beach 2 days before Christmas, and I want to tell you something about walking into a house that is yours when no one in the world knows it's yours. It feels like a secret you're keeping with God. The estate sat at the end of a private drive lined with royal palms, and when the gate swung open and the house revealed itself all white stone and glass glowing against the deep blue of the Atlantic, I had to stop the car for a moment just to breathe. Robert would have stood in this driveway with his hands on his hips, shaking his head, saying, "Diane, baby, look what we did." Because none of it would have existed without him. I'd carried him with me through that gate the way I carried him everywhere. Diana Mitchell met me at the door, tablet in hand, a small army of workers already moving behind her like a tide. "Ms. Taylor," she said, and I could see her recalibrating the way people did when they finally met the woman behind the money. "I have to be honest with you. I've decorated for senators, for a tech billionaire's anniversary, but I've never had a client tell me to make a house feel like vindication. So I want to make sure I understood you right." "You understood me right," I said. She smiled. "Then let me show you what vindication looks like." By that evening, the transformation had begun, and it was beyond anything I'd imagined. Diana had strung the gardens with 2,000 warm golden bulbs, so the whole estate seemed to float in a sea of soft amber light. The infinity pool reflected it all back, doubling the glow until the grounds looked enchanted. Fresh wreaths of magnolia and eucalyptus hung from every doorway, filling the air with a green living scent. A Christmas tree rose 14 feet in the great room, dressed not in plastic ornaments, but in hand-blown glass and tiny white lights, and at its top, instead of an angel, Diana had placed a single golden star. "I thought about the angel," she said, watching my face. "But angels watch over people. Stars guide them home. Seemed more like you." I had to turn away so she wouldn't see my eyes fill. In the kitchen, Chef Louis and his team had taken over completely, and the smells coming out of there could have raised the dead. He'd planned 8 courses, and when he walked me through them, I understood the man was an artist. He wasn't trying to out-French Victoria's French. He was doing something better. Fresh Gulf oysters to start. A lobster bisque so rich it should have been illegal. Beef Wellington beside a dish of slow-braised oxtail that smelled like my grandmother's Sunday kitchen. He was putting the food of my people on the same gleaming table as the food the world called fine dining, and refusing to rank them because they were equals. Because we were all equals. That was the whole point. "Ms. Taylor," Louis said, ladling a taste of the bisque into a spoon for me. "Where I come from, we say you can't fake a good roux, and you can't fake love. This whole menu is both. And the music, I'd been firm about the music. No string quartet sawing through Vivaldi. I wanted Ella Fitzgerald. I wanted Nat King Cole singing the Christmas song, the way he sang it like a warm hand on your shoulder. I wanted Sam Cooke because Robert used to hum him in the bathroom, and I wanted my husband at this party, even if only I knew he was there. I walked through it all that night alone after the workers had gone. Through the great room, across the cool marble, out onto the veranda where the ocean breathed in the dark. I stood at the railing with the salt wind in my face, and I let myself feel the full weight of what I was doing. For 12 years I had made myself small so that I could see people clearly. I had worn the same 3 dresses and clipped my coupons and let my own family pity me all, so I could learn the truth of who loved Diane and who only tolerated her. Now the seeing was done. Now it was time to be seen. The next morning, Christmas Eve, my phone rang. "James." I let it ring twice before I answered, sitting on that veranda with a cup of coffee and the whole shining Atlantic spread out before me. "Merry Christmas Eve, Mom." His voice had that forced brightness, the sound of a man working very hard to feel okay about something. "I just wanted to check in. Make sure you're doing all right over there." "I'm doing wonderfully, baby," I said, and I wasn't lying. "Better than I've done in years." "Yeah." A flicker of surprise. He'd expected me wilting in my apartment, maybe. He'd expected to feel needed so he could feel forgiven. "You sound good. You got plans for tomorrow? You're not going to be alone, are you?" The concern in it might have moved me once, but I'd learned to hear the thing underneath, and underneath was a man hoping I'd say yes. I have plans so he could close the door on his guilt and enjoy his caviar in peace. "Oh, I have plans," I said. "I'm hosting, actually. A big dinner. Lots of family." A pause. "Hosting at the apartment. No baby." I let the silence breathe. "At my house. Your house." He laughed gently, the way you'd correct a child. "Mom, what house?" "You mean the apartment." "I mean my house, James." My voice was as calm and warm as the morning. "I'll tell you all about it soon. You go enjoy your dinner. Tell Victoria I hope her parents have a safe flight. And give my grandbaby a kiss for me." In the background, I heard Victoria's voice sharp with that suspicion she could never quite hide. "What's she talking about?" "What house?" "Nothing, it's nothing," James murmured to her away from the phone. Then back to me, his tone shifting, the lawyer in him sensing something he couldn't cross-examine. "Mom, is there something going on I should know about?" I looked out at the ocean, at the infinity pool catching the morning light, at the gardens where in a matter of hours 41 people who loved me would gather to celebrate a woman they'd never been allowed to fully meet. "There's a great deal going on, sweetheart," I said softly. "But you'll understand it soon enough. Merry Christmas, James." And I hung up the phone before he could say another word, because for the first time in 12 years, I was the one who decided when the conversation was over. I finished my coffee in the quiet. Then I rose, smoothed my robe, and went inside to get ready. My guests would be arriving soon. They came as the sun began to slip toward the water, and I greeted every single one of them at the door myself. Emma was first stepping out of a car with her mouth already open, frozen on the gravel, like she'd forgotten how her legs worked. She stood there in her green dress, staring up at the house, and when I came down the steps toward her, she grabbed both my hands and just held on. "Diane," she whispered, "tell me you didn't do something foolish. Tell me this is really yours." "It's really mine, baby." I kissed her cheek. "Now come inside before you catch a chill being shocked." DeAndre arrived next, his whole family spilling out of the rental van like a parade. His youngest, a little girl of 8 named Nina, took one look at the lit-up gardens and the marble fountain and shrieked, "Auntie Diane, is this a castle? Are you a queen?" I knelt down to her level, this child who hugged me every time she saw me, whether I had $1 or $1 million of them, and I said, "Tonight, baby, I just might be. And that makes you a princess." She ran off into the garden lights, squealing, her brothers chasing after, and I watched my brother watch his children fill my home with the sound of pure, uncomplicated joy. He came and stood beside me, this man with grease that never fully left his hands, and for a long moment, he couldn't speak. "All these years," DeAndre finally said, his voice rough. "All these years you let me slip you 50s. Let me worry about you. I let you love me, Andy," I said. That's all that was. And I'll never forget a single 50 because every one of them was real. He had to look away then. So did I. By the time the light went gold over the ocean, all 41 of them had arrived, and my home was full, in a way it had never been, full of laughter, of music, of people who belonged. Rebecca worked the room like the force of nature she was, and Stephen made himself quietly useful in a corner, and Diana's photographer moved through it all, catching everything the children by the pool. The old folks settled deep in leather chairs, the glasses raised against the darkening sky. And then there was Jackson. He arrived near the end, a tall, gentle-faced man in his 40s, and when he took my hand at the door, his grip was warm and his eyes were sad. In a way, I recognized the eyes of someone who'd been made to feel small by the same people who'd done it to me. "Ms. Taylor," he said, "thank you for letting me come." "We'll talk later, Jackson," I said, because I could feel the weight of what he carried, and I wasn't ready to set down the joy of the evening just yet. "Tonight, just be among people who are glad you're here." He nodded, and something eased in his face, and he stepped into the warmth of the house. But the moment I will carry with me until the day I die came at dinner. We were 42 souls around a table that Diana had set like a vision linen and crystal and white orchids running the length of it, candlelight catching every glass. Chef Lewis had brought out the first courses, and the oohs and ahs had risen and settled, and the room had filled with that particular hum of people who are happy and well-fed and loved. And then old Mr. Abernathy stood up. I should tell you about Cornelius Abernathy. He was 83 years old, and he had lived next door to Robert and me for 30 years back before everything. A retired professor of history, a widower twice over, a man who'd once been somebody and had spent the last decade being treated like furniture by a world that had decided old men had nothing left to offer. Victoria had met him exactly once at a barbecue, and afterward had murmured that it was depressing to be around people waiting to die. He hadn't been invited to a family gathering since. I'd sent a car for him personally. He rose now slow, one weathered hand braced on the table, and the room fell quiet the way rooms do when something true is about to happen. He lifted his glass, and his hand trembled, and when he spoke, his voice was thin, but it carried to every corner of that great room. "I am 83 years old," Cornelius said, "and I want to tell you all something if you'll indulge an old man for a moment." The children went still, even Nina. "A year ago," he went on, "I had made my peace with being finished. Not dying, I don't mean dying. I mean finished. Done being looked at. Done being spoken to like I was already gone. You reach a certain age and the world stops setting you a place at the table." He paused and his eyes found mine across the candlelight. I had begun to believe them. I had begun to believe that I was a burden, that my time was something other people had to be patient about. I felt my throat close. And then, he said, his voice catching a black woman near as old as I am, who the world had been busy making small for years, who they'd decided wasn't fine enough, wasn't rich enough, wasn't enough, stood up. And she did not stand up quietly. She stood up and she sent a car for an old man everyone else had forgotten, and she sat him at the head of a table fit for kings. And she said without saying it, "You still matter. You are always enough." The tears were running freely down his face now, and he didn't wipe them, and neither did anyone else. "Diane Taylor," Cornelius said, raising his trembling glass higher, "you didn't just open your home tonight. You opened a door I thought had closed on me forever. You reminded me that dignity is not something the world grants us. It's something we are born holding, and no one has the right to take it away." To Diane, who remembered all of us when she could have forgotten. "To Diane," the room answered 40 voices, thick with tears, glasses lifted high in the candlelight. And I sat there at my own table in my own home, surrounded by every person who had ever loved me when I had nothing to give, and I wept, openly, without shame. For the first time in 12 years, I let them all see exactly how much it had cost me to be made small for so long, and exactly how much it meant to finally be seen. Emma reached over and took my hand. DeAndre raised his glass to me from across the table, his jaw working. Nina, not understanding why the grown-ups were crying, but understanding that it mattered, climbed into my lap and put her small arms around my neck. "Don't cry, Auntie Queen," she whispered. "These are good tears, baby," I told her, holding on. "These are the best tears I've ever cried." Across the room, I caught Diana quietly directing her photographer, and I knew that the images being captured in this room tonight would travel far beyond these walls. Let them, I thought. Let the whole world see what a real family looks like. Because somewhere across the state, in a house full of fine china and imported caviar, and people who had decided I wasn't good enough to sit among them, my son was about to learn exactly what he had thrown away. And the night was only just beginning. After dinner, while the guests drifted out to the veranda for dessert and the children chased fireflies across the lawn, I found a quiet moment with Jackson. We stood together at the far end of the terrace, away from the music, the dark ocean rolling below us. He held his coffee in both hands like he needed the warmth, and for a while neither of us spoke. "You said there were things I should know," I finally said. "About Victoria, about how that household really works." Jackson nodded slowly. He looked out at the water before he answered. "Miss Taylor, I was engaged to Victoria for 2 years. I loved her. And in those 2 years, I learned something that I think you've spent 12 years being punished for without ever understanding why." He turned to face me. "Victoria isn't rich." I blinked. "I don't follow. Her family was wealthy. Old Connecticut money, the country club, all of it. But it's gone, Ms. Taylor. It's been gone for nearly 15 years. Her father made some bad investments, then some worse ones, trying to cover the first ones. By the time Victoria was in college, it was all performance. The house was mortgaged to the studs. The club membership was comped by an old friend out of pity. The family money she talks about." He shook his head. "There isn't any. There hasn't been for a long, long time." I stood very still, the pieces turning in my mind, rearranging themselves into a picture I had never been able to see. "She made me sign a prenup so airtight it should have been a warning," Jackson went on quietly. "Not to protect her wealth, to hide that there wasn't any. When I started asking questions, when I got too close to the truth, she ended it. Told everyone I lacked ambition. The truth was I'd seen behind the curtain, and she couldn't have that. I thought of 12 years of barbed comments. Those thrift store dresses, those coupons. People will think we lack class. You don't fit our lifestyle. I thought of a woman who flinched at the sight of someone living modestly without shame, and I finally understood. She wasn't disgusted by me," I said slowly. "She was afraid of me." "Yes," Jackson said. "You were everything she was terrified of becoming. A woman the world might decide wasn't rich enough, wasn't fine enough. She spent 12 years attacking you because every time she looked at you, she saw the truth she was running from." He set down his coffee. "She didn't hate you, Ms. Taylor. She hated her own reflection, and you were the closest mirror." I had come into this evening believing I understood Victoria's cruelty completely. And in one quiet conversation on a dark veranda, the whole shape of it changed. It didn't excuse her. Lord knows it didn't. But it explained her. And there is a particular kind of mercy that only becomes possible once you finally understand. "Thank you, Jackson," I said. And I meant it more than he knew. While I'd been on the veranda, Diana had been busy. She found me afterward with her laptop, her eyes bright. "Ms. Taylor, I posted the photos. To your Facebook, your Instagram, the family group chat, all of it. I hope that's all right." She turned the screen toward me. "You should see what's happening." The images were extraordinary. The mansion glowing like a lantern in the dark. The table running long with crystal and candlelight. 41 faces lit up with genuine joy. And there in one frame, me, standing on the veranda in my champagne gown, and my mother's pearls glass raised the ocean black and infinite behind me. I looked like someone I'd waited 12 years to be allowed to look like. The captions were simple. "Spending Christmas with the people who truly see me. Grateful beyond words. And under another 41 hearts, one home." This is what real wealth looks like. The comments were already pouring in by the dozen. "Diane, is this your home? It's a palace. We had no idea, why didn't you ever invite us? You look like royalty." Cousins, old friends, neighbors, people surfacing from years away, astonished. And then my phone began to ring. "James." I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. And again. I set it face down on the table and went back to my guests. And over the next 2 hours, that phone lit up 43 times. 17 missed calls became 26, then 30. Text messages stacked up like snowfall. Mom, where are you? Whose house is this? Mom, please call me. We're worried. And then in Victoria's unmistakable voice, Ms. Diane, I don't understand what you're trying to prove. This is inappropriate. Call us immediately. Inappropriate. Even now. Even in panic. I picked up exactly once. I put it on speaker so Emma and DeAndre could hear, and I kept my voice as warm and unhurried as the ocean breeze. Mom? James's voice cracked through. Where are you? We drove to your apartment. You weren't there. The neighbor said you left 2 days ago. I'm at home, baby, having a wonderful Christmas with family. At home, Mom, whose house is in these pictures. Victoria says it's impossible, she says in the background. Victoria's voice sharp and unraveling. Tell her those photos can't be real. No one stages something like that. They're not staged, sweetheart, I said gently. Nothing about tonight is staged. For the first time in a very long time, nothing about my life is staged at all. Silence on the line, the heavy kind. Mom, James said, and his voice had gone small. I don't understand what's happening. I know you don't, baby, I said. But you will. Merry Christmas. And I hung up. At midnight, the fireworks I'd hired lit up the sky over the Atlantic gold and crimson and brilliant white, blooming above the black water, while 41 people stood on my veranda and cheered. The children gasped. Cornelius watched with tears shining on his cheeks. Emma slipped her arm through mine. And in the middle of all that light and joy, my phone buzzed one last time, a call from a number I didn't recognize. Something made me answer it. Grandma. A small voice trembling. Tyler. Calling from a friend's phone the way children do when they're desperate. Grandma, why aren't you here? I miss you so much. Everything in me went still. Oh, my sweet boy, I said softly, stepping away from the fireworks into the quiet. I miss you too, more than you know. Mommy's been crying and Daddy's really mad and nobody will tell me anything, he said in a rush. I saw pictures of a big house. Is that where you are? Why didn't you take me? And there it was, the thing that pierced straight through all my satisfaction, all my vindication, and found the soft place underneath. Because in protecting myself and finally standing tall, I had left this child on the other side of a door he didn't build. Tyler hadn't humiliated me. Tyler had only ever loved me. And in the great reckoning I'd set in motion, I had not once stopped to think about how it would land on the one truly innocent heart in that house. Baby, I said, my own voice thick now. You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault, you hear me? Sometimes grown-ups make big mistakes and they have to fix them, and that takes a little time. But I love you. I will always love you. Nothing in this world could ever change that. Can I come see you? Soon, I whispered. I promise, very soon. In the background, I heard Victoria's voice rise. Tyler, whose phone is that? And then the line went dead. I stood there in the dark while the fireworks faded, holding a silent phone, and understood that my night of triumph had a cost I hadn't fully counted. Tomorrow there would be a reckoning, and it would have to make room for a little boy. I woke on Christmas morning in the primary bedroom of my own estate in a bed that faced the ocean, and for a few seconds before memory caught up with me, I simply lay there and watched the sun come up over the water. Then I reached for my phone and the world came rushing back. 87 missed calls, over 200 messages. The screen was so full of notifications it looked like static. I scrolled through slowly with my coffee the way you might walk through the wreckage after a storm, not afraid of it, just taking the measure of what had happened. Most of it I'd expected. The cousins and old friends astonished and delighted. Diane, we are so happy for you. The relatives who'd been quietly written off for years suddenly seeing proof that the woman they loved had been somebody all along. And then the messages from James. They told a story all on their own, a story that moved through stages like grief. First confusion, Mom. I don't understand any of this. Then suspicion, the lawyer surfacing. Is this real? Whose house is that, actually? Then something that broke my heart a little because it was the first honest thing he'd said to me in years, Mom. I'm scared. Please just tell me you're okay. I'm scared I've lost you. And Victoria. Her texts were their own education. They began defensive. This is a lot of drama, Ms. Diane, and curdled into something close to panic as the night went on. Why didn't you ever say you had money? As though my crime was the keeping of it. As though the only thing that could possibly make me worth her respect was the very thing she'd spent 12 years certain I didn't have. But it was the last message in the thread that stopped me cold. It was from Emma, sent at 6 that morning, and it wasn't text. It was a voice recording. The note above it read, Diane Yolanda's cousin works with someone who was supposed to cater Victoria's dinner. You need to hear this. I'm sorry, baby. I pressed play. It was Emma's voice, careful and low. Diane, I don't even know how to tell you this. That big fancy European dinner Victoria threw you out for, it never happened. Her parents never came. Word is they canceled at the last minute, but honey, the catering company canceled on them because the deposit check bounced. Victoria's been telling everyone her family's flying in from Connecticut for years, and the truth is, they couldn't afford the plane tickets. So while you had 41 people who love you, that girl was sitting in her dining room with a bounced caterer and an empty table, and she made you feel like dirt to cover for it. I'm so sorry. You deserve to know. I set the phone down on the white linens and looked out at the ocean for a long, long time. So that was the whole of it. The refined dinner, too fine for me to attend, had collapsed into nothing. The caviar and the imported champagne and the French traditions. It had all been a story Victoria told to keep the truth at bay. And she had needed to make me small that week, needed it badly. Because if I was the embarrassment, then she didn't have to be. She'd thrown me out of a party that was already falling apart in her hands. I thought I would feel triumphant. I felt instead an old and bone-deep sorrow. For 12 years I'd been wounded by a woman who was drowning and who decided the way to stay afloat was to push my head under the water. There was no victory in that. There was only the sad, plain truth of it, finally visible in the morning light. And there was a little boy in the middle of it all. At 8 o'clock I called Tyler. Emma had quietly arranged it, called the friend's mother, made sure the phone would be in his hands and not Victoria's. He answered on the first ring, breathless. Grandma. Good morning, my sweet boy. Merry Christmas. Grandma, are you mad at me? The question came out in a tumble the way a child releases a fear they've been carrying all night. Mommy said you went away. Did I do something? Was it because my homework was bad? Lord, that question. It went straight through me. No, baby. No, no, no. I closed my eyes. You listen to me, Tyler, and you remember this your whole life. You did nothing wrong. Not one single thing. You are the most precious boy in the whole world, and Grandma loves you more than all the stars in the sky. Do you hear me? Then why didn't you come? Because grown-ups in your house and Grandma have some things to work out, I said carefully. Big people things, and it's going to take a little time. But here's what I need you to know. I am not going away from you. Not ever. You and me were forever. A small sniffle. Mommy said you're rich now. Are you different? I'm the same Grandma who reads you bedtime stories, I said. I just have a bigger house to read them in. And there's a beach here, baby. A whole beach all our own. When you come, we'll build a sandcastle so big you can see it from space. Can I come today? Soon, I promised. Very, very soon. And then I heard the scrape of the phone changing hands and Victoria's voice taut as a wire. Ms. Diane, you can't do this. You can't just. Tyler needs stability. He needs a normal routine. You can't come in and... Victoria, I said quietly, and something in my tone stopped her cold. I know. A pause. You know what? I know about the dinner. I know about your family. I know there's no money and there hasn't been for a long time. I know why you've spent 12 years trying to make me feel like nothing. I let it sit a moment. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you so you understand I see you, all the way down. And the strange thing is now that I do, I'm not angry. I'm just sad for you, Victoria. That's a hard, lonely way to live, spending all your strength hiding. The silence on the other end was total. I could hear her breathing. As for stability, I went on gentle but immovable. A child's stability isn't a fine address or the right china. It's knowing he's loved without conditions. It's being raised by people who don't measure each other's worth by what's in the bank. Tyler will always have a place with me. That's not a threat. That's a promise. And it's not going anywhere. I heard her start to say something and then stop. And then very quietly, almost too quiet to hear, she said, "I don't know how to do that." It was, I think, the first true thing Victoria had ever said to me. "I know you don't," I said, "but you can learn, and I suspect before long you're going to want to." I hung up gently this time, not in triumph, just because the conversation was finished. Then I rose and dressed and made myself ready, because I knew as surely as I knew the sun was rising over my own ocean that before this day was out, my son was going to stand at my gate. And this time I intended to open it. They came at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I was on the veranda when I heard the car a hard stop at the gate, gravel spitting under the tires. Through the intercom camera, I watched them get out, and even from a distance, I could see the wreckage of the night written all over them. James was still in yesterday's clothes, unshaven, his eyes hollow. Victoria, who I had never once seen less than immaculate, stood beside him with her hair undone and her makeup gone, and something broken in the way she held herself. They stared up at the house for a long time. I let them. I let them take in the marble fountain and the royal palms and the ocean glittering beyond the glass, the full impossible weight of it. I watched my son's mouth move, forming words he couldn't quite say. Then James pressed the bell and his voice came through, trembling. "Mom, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk." I made them wait 5 minutes. Just 5. Enough time to finish my coffee and to settle my own heart, because the truth is, I was not made of stone, and the sight of my boy so undone had already started to ache in me. Then I pressed the button, and the gate swung open. They walked up the long stone path slowly, like people approaching something holy or something dangerous, and when they reached the door, I opened it myself, dressed in a deep red, my mother's pearls at my throat, standing in the home that was mine. The looks on their faces were the looks I had waited 12 years to see. Not because I wanted them humbled, but because for the first time they were seeing me. The real me. The one who'd been standing in front of them the whole time. "Hello, James," I said. "Hello, Victoria, come in." I sat them on the leather sofa in the great room beneath the 14-foot tree and the golden star, and I took the chair across from them, and for a moment no one spoke. It was James who broke. "Mom, His voice cracked straight in half. "I don't even know where to start. The house, the mom, who are you?" "I'm exactly who I've always been, baby," I said. "You just never looked." "Is it real?" Victoria asked, and even now there was a thread of the old disbelief in it, the inability to imagine that I could be what I plainly was. "This house, is it actually—" "Paid in full," I said. $18 million. Cash. 3 days before James called to tell me I wasn't refined enough for Christmas dinner. The number landed in the room like a stone in still water. Victoria's face went white. I let the silence hold. And then I called out, "Stephen." My advisor came in from the next room, calm and professional, a leather portfolio under his arm. He'd been waiting. James looked at him baffled. "James, Victoria, this is Stephen Porter," I said. "He's managed my finances for 12 years. I asked him to be here today because I think it's time you understood the whole of it, and I'd rather a professional walk you through the numbers than have you spend the next year doubting them." Stephen opened the portfolio and spoke gently the way you deliver news to people in shock. Ms. Taylor's late husband, Robert, built a foundation in technology equities and real estate beginning in the late 90s. At the time of his passing, the estate was valued at approximately $5 million. He paused. Under careful management over the past 12 years, that estate has grown. Ms. Taylor currently holds 3 residential properties, 15 income-producing rentals across 4 states, and a securities portfolio of significant size. The total net worth as of this quarter is approximately $92 million. The room went so quiet I could hear the ocean through the glass. 92. James couldn't finish it. He looked at me like the floor had dropped out from under him. 92 million. And you lived in that apartment. You clipped coupons. I gave you, oh my God, Mom, I gave you grocery money. I felt good about it. You did, I said softly. Why? The word tore out of him. Why would you let us think? Why would you live like that? Why would you let me? Because I needed to know something, James. I leaned forward. Sit still and hear me, because I'm only going to say this once. This was the moment, the one everything had been building toward. When your father died, I was 50 years old, and the grief nearly took me. I left the money alone because touching it felt like betraying him. But the years went by, and I started to notice things. I noticed how the world treats a woman it believes has nothing. I noticed how the invitations thinned out. I noticed how your wife looked at me and how you stopped defending me and how I got moved further and further down the table until there wasn't a place set for me at all. I held his eyes, and a question took root in me, James. A question I had to answer even if it cost me 12 years to do it. Who loves me, not who loves what I can give them? Who loves Diane when they believe she has nothing left to offer but herself? Tears were running down my son's face now. He didn't wipe them. And I got my answer. I went on. My sister drove 6 hours to nurse me through pneumonia, asking for nothing. My brother slipped me 50s he couldn't spare because he thought I was struggling. 41 people came across this whole country on 3 days' notice because I asked them to. That's who loves me. My voice dropped. And then there's you, baby. My beautiful boy who I would die for without a second's thought. I watched you let your wife shrink me year after year and say nothing. I watched you hand me $20 and call it love. And I watched you decide this very week that your own mother wasn't good enough to sit at your table. Mom, so here's what I need you to answer, and I need you to answer it honestly. I held him in my gaze and would not let go. You're sitting in my home today, not because you suddenly understand that I deserve respect, but because you found out I have money. And I need to know that you can see the difference. Because if the only thing that makes me worth loving to you is the size of my bank account, then you are no better than the woman sitting beside you, and you have a long, hard road ahead of you, James. The room held its breath, and my son slid off of that sofa down onto his knees on the marble floor in front of my chair and put his face in my lap the way he had when he was a little boy with a skinned knee, and he wept. I see it, he choked out. Mom, I see it. I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything for so long. It was never the money. I lost you because I stopped looking at you. I let her decide who you were because it was easier than standing up. And the worst part, he lifted his ruined face to mine. The worst part is I think I knew. Somewhere I knew I was failing you, and I let it happen anyway. I'm so sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry. Mama. He hadn't called me that since he was a child. I put my hands on my son's head, and I felt 12 years of held-back tears finally break loose, and I let them come. I know, baby, I whispered. I know. Beside us, forgotten for a moment, Victoria sat with her hands over her mouth, and she was crying too. Not the performance of tears I might once have suspected, but something raw, something that looked a great deal like a woman watching her whole carefully built world come apart and seeing maybe for the first time what had been real all along. I looked at her over the top of my son's bowed head. Victoria, I said, we're going to have to talk too, but not today. She nodded, unable to speak, and for the first time in 12 years, all the masks in that room were finally completely off. Forgiveness, I have learned, is not a door you walk through once. It's a road you walk every day, sometimes forward, sometimes back, for as long as it takes. The weeks after that Christmas were not a fairy tale. I want to be honest about that, because the world is full of stories where everyone hugs and the music swells and all is mended by morning. And those stories do a disservice to anyone who has ever actually had to rebuild something broken. What broke in my family over 12 years was not going to heal in 12 days. But it began to heal, and the beginning was real. James came back the next day. Alone this time. No Victoria, no agenda. Just my son standing at my gate with his hands in his pockets like a boy who'd been sent to the principal's office. I let him in and we sat on the veranda and he asked me a question that told me more than any apology could have. "Mom," he said, "in all those years, was there ever a time you felt I truly saw you, not as my mother, as a person, as Diane?" I thought about it honestly because he deserved honesty. "When you were small," I said, "when you needed me, you saw me clear as day. But somewhere along the way, baby, I became furniture to you. Useful, familiar, easy to stop noticing." He flinched, but he didn't argue. "I want to know her," he said quietly. "Diane, the woman who built all this and still bought generic peanut butter. I missed her my whole adult life, and I want whatever time I have left to know her." And he meant it. That was the thing. Over the months that followed, James did not try to win me back with gifts or grand gestures he knew better now. He won me back with the small things, the things that cost nothing and mean everything. He called me every single day, not to ask for anything, just to hear how my morning went. He started asking about Robert, about the investments, about the woman I'd been before I was anyone's mother. He came down to Palm Beach and sat with me on the beach and listened, really listened for the first time in 20 years. Tyler came too. Oh, how that boy came. Every weekend after the new year, James would drive him down, and Tyler would explode out of the car and tear across the lawn into my arms, and we would build sandcastles on our own private beach until the sun went down. One Saturday, knee-deep in wet sand, he looked up at me with those serious brown eyes and said, "Grandma, are you a superhero? You looked like a regular grandma, but really you were rich the whole time. That's like a secret identity." I laughed until I cried. "No, baby, I'm not a superhero. I'm just a woman who decided she was worth something even when nobody else could see it. And one day when you're grown, I hope you remember that you're worth something too, no matter what anybody's bank account says. Yours or theirs." He nodded solemn as a judge and went back to his castle. And I thought that's the inheritance that matters. Not the money, the knowing. Victoria was the hardest and the slowest, and in the end the most surprising. For the first few weeks, she circled at a distance, sending careful messages that still carried the old defensiveness, the inability to simply say I was wrong without an excuse trailing behind it. "Ms. Diane, I know I was harsh, but I never expected you to hold a grudge like this. As if my dignity were the inconvenience. I didn't punish her for it, but I didn't pretend either." "The issue isn't a grudge, Victoria," I told her. "The issue is that for 12 years you tried to make me disappear in my own family. We can't move forward until you can say that plainly without a but on the end of it." And then slowly something shifted. She started therapy in February. She told me so herself on her first visit to the house without James there to buffer between us. We sat in the great room and she turned her teacup around and around in her hands and finally said, "My therapist thinks I treated you the way I did because you were everything I was terrified of being. A woman the world might decide wasn't enough." She looked up and her eyes were wet. "She's right. I spent my whole life performing a wealth that didn't exist, and you didn't perform anything, and people loved you anyway. I couldn't stand it, because it meant maybe the whole game I'd been playing was a lie." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said, and I reached across and took her hand. "It was a lie, baby," I said gently, "but you don't have to keep playing it. There's another way to live. I can show you if you'll let me." She cried then the real kind, and I held her, and that was the beginning of Victoria, too. By spring, the story had grown beyond my family entirely. Rebecca had shared what happened in some of her foundation circles, and I started getting letters, dozens of them, then hundreds from older women all over the country who'd been underestimated, dismissed, made small by the people who should have loved them best. One came from a 74-year-old woman in Ohio who'd spent 20 years pretending to be a tired retiree while quietly running a business she'd never told her family about. "Your story gave me the courage to stop hiding," she wrote. "I finally told them who I am. So I built something with it. With Stephen's help and Rebecca's guidance, I founded the Dignity Fund dedicated to older Americans, and especially older Black women who'd been pushed to the margins of their own families. Our first program reconnected grandparents with grandchildren who'd been kept apart. I made Cornelius Abernathy our honorary chairman. At 83, that man stood up at our launch and gave a speech that left not one dry eye in the building. He had a purpose again. He had a table. I had given that to him, and he had given me back something just as precious in return. In June, I gathered them all again. Not for revenge this time, there was nothing left to avenge, just for joy. We sat on the veranda as the sun went down over the Atlantic James and Victoria, who were learning slowly to be better than they'd been. Tyler brown and happy from a winter of beaches. Emma and DeAndre and Rebecca and Stephen and old Cornelius in the place of honor. And I raised my glass to all of them. "I don't want to talk about money anymore," I said. "I'm done with that. I want to talk about love, because love is the only thing I ever actually wanted. Love is a choice. I chose to love my son even when he broke my heart. I chose to give Victoria a road out of the prison she built for herself. I choose every single day to love this family. And the most important choice I ever made, my voice caught, was choosing finally, after 62 years, to love myself enough to believe I deserved a seat at the table, not at the end of it, at the head of it." James lifted his glass, tears in his eyes. "To Mama," he said, "who never stopped being worth it, even when we couldn't see it." "To Mama," they echoed. And as the sun touched the water and Sam Cooke drifted soft from the speakers, Robert sung "My Husband Still at My Party" the way he always would be. Tyler climbed into my lap and put his arms around my neck, and I held my whole family close in the golden dying light. We were not finished. We were not perfect. There were years of road still ahead of us. But we had begun, and after 12 years of being made small, I had learned the only lesson that ever truly mattered. Dignity is not something you beg the world to grant you. It is something you were born holding, and no one has the right to take it from you.